Wolf McNally. I'm the lead researcher for Blockchain Commons. I'm working on the ZeWIF wallet interchange format project, and in specific, a Rust code base that I've called Zmigrate that is intended to be the framework that is kind of the intermediary between input wallet formats and output wallet formats. I'm going to share my VS Code screen here. You should be seeing that now. This is, basically my workspace of all of the projects that Blockchain Commons works on in Rust, including the new Zmigrate. This is available on the Blockchain Commons account on GitHub right now. It's only a commit, or this what you're about to see is a commit or two ahead of what's there, but minor commits. But right now, what you can do, as you can see, I've got a set of DAT files here. These are what were in the Zcash wallet formats repo for the Zcash D, including I guess these are support Orchard, these ones have only transparent transactions in them. And then I have another directory called dumps, where there's a parallel set of structures of what's been dumped from the tool itself. And these are all text formats. As you can see, they begin because the Zcash D format is Berkeley DB. I start with just a summary of the keys and their sizes when I parse it. And then I actually jumping to the end here, you see it says all keys parsed successfully. I'm actually keeping track throughout the parsing process to make sure I parse every byte of every key and every key in the database because I don't want to miss anything. The actual wallet dump itself here includes all the subkeys. These have all been parsed into memory. I'm not trying to set up a functional wallet in memory here, so I'm not actually going through and setting up all the structures Zcash does with Zingo. I'm not setting up all the structures Zingo has. I'm mostly looking at these things as things to be interchanged. But everything you're seeing here is potentially very Zcash D specific. For example, it's transaction format. These are all based directly on the Zcash D formats, how it serializes these things. But in some cases, I've parsed them out so that you can actually see like the transaction group number as an enum, things like that. The transaction inputs. Let's see, hold down shift here. Yeah, so transaction outputs and so on. This is all just Rust debug output, but it's very nice because it folds very nicely in VS Code. So it's good for exploring these things. The sapling bundle, the orchard bundle, these things get quite deeply nested. But I've at least in terms of the keys that are in the BDBs that I received, they're all being parsed currently. So what is the actual kind of framework here? Right, currently it's just a very simple command line tool. It's got a number of submodules here, but I'm not using clap or whatever to do the parsing of the command line at this point. I've written a number of other command line tools for Blockchain Commons, and I expect eventually we'll probably move to a better command line tool parser, because all I'm doing right now is just getting one input file, which is a Berkeley DB file, and then parsing it. And I realize there's a number of different parsing frameworks for Rust in many ways, and I developed another very simple one because I wanted to make sure that I could use a very kind of uniform parsing method throughout, which I'll show you in a moment. But it's based on this simple parser structure, which basically just is a trait that you can implement called parse, and then the actual parsing structure is very small. And that's because I want to extend it to do various kinds of parsing for various kinds of wallets, because I don't want to make assumptions about how wallets encode integers, whether big or little endian, or whether how vectors or maps are encoded, things like that. So because Zcash D has one way of doing it, Zingo may have other ways of doing it, and they may share certain things in common, or they may be very different. But I want to be able to use this in the same kind of parsing framework for everything. And then I have a parse macro here, which you'll see how I use it. It has a number of different arms to its matches, but that isn't what's important to you if you work with this framework. Let's like dive in, look at Zcash D. There's a Zcash D folder here, which is everything specific to Zcash D. And so, for example, well, if we'll just look at the let's look at the big one here, transaction. Transaction. So let's just look at the wallet TX. So this is the Zcash D wallet transaction equivalent. And as you can see, it's got the same things you expect. The version, these are basically fairly semantically high level, but they're not, like I say, ready to be used as wallet structures. But they are ready to be, possibly translated into other intermediate structures to be output to other wallet formats. And then basically have implemented the parse for that. There's a number of, and this is basically kind of reflects what's in the combination of C++ and Rust code in the Zcash code basis, but this follows the same logic in terms of what to parse in what order, in terms of parsing everything out, and then finally constructing a wallet transaction from that. But you'll notice that throughout this, I'm using the parse macro here, which basically uses leverages Rust's type inference to determine what type it is actually. You can actually give it the type that you want if you want to control that type, where you can declare it here, or you can just let it infer the type from how it's being used elsewhere. But as you can see, each time I call parse, I pass it the parser, I pass it context. So it's building a context stack. So if at some point parsing fails, the actual output is a useful context stack of what it was parsing within what it was parsing within what it was parsing. So I can actually pinpoint that really easily as I run it and something is incorrectly parsed. But as you can see, it's more a matter of just calling parse in the order things are in the actual structure that's being parsed, the key, the value, the whatever in this case, because BerkeleyDB, it could be either. In the case of Zingo, it's going to be one long monolithic structure, but it's still going to be important to do this kind of in-order parsing of various types. At the high level, let's see. So main, basically, I have I have a BDB dump structure here, and this basically takes just from a file path. It actually calls out to the db dump command line tool, which you have to have installed in your system to actually do the dumping. There's no reason to reinvent that wheel myself. But once I have that, then I have this BDB dump structure with its header records, its data, which I'm ignoring, but it's also all its data records. And then from that, I actually create a Zcash dedump, which is because Zcash uses a particular format for its keys and values, where it has a string for its key name, followed by some arbitrary binary part of the key, and then it has a value, which is also binary. I have the structure that represents the DB key and the DB value here. And then I take the BDB dump, parse that into the Zcash dump. From there, now I have a set of records, which are keys, DB keys and DB values, and also for convenience, the keys by the key name. So I can just look up the key names as I go. So this is the part that does that conversion. Once I have the BDB dump, I pass that to the Zcash parser. The Zcash parser itself takes the dump as an input, keeps track of the unparsed keys, and this is again how I'm basically making. So if you run this on a wallet and it turns out it has keys that I missed somehow, then that gets kept track of here. So and there will be an error report at the end saying that certain keys were missed. But then this actually does creates the Zcash parser and then calls parse on it. So, and again, doing housekeeping here to keep track of the parsed keys, and then actually parsing all the keys. Some of them were removed, some of them are optional. So, but here you see I'm going down the enumeration of all the keys, and for some of them, for example, are being rolled into one, where I'm actually parsing certain keys together because they really belong together semantically. Others, and there are certain cases where I wasn't quite sure what to do, and we'll have to figure that out later. But most cases, I think I understand it well enough. So, for example, if we drill down here, well, let's actually just continue reviewing this as we go down through all the keys. Finally, once I've got all the keys together, then I actually construct the Zcash wallet, and that's the in-memory representation of the wallet that will then be abstracted further into the kind of generic ZeWIF wallet format in-memory representation. I eventually hope that, like, for example, the Zcash D stuff you're seeing here will be part of a pluggable front end, and then there will also be a pluggable back end that can be used for various kinds of formats. The main pluggable back end or the main, at least hard-coded back we intended to provide is ZeWIF, so anybody can read that in and then do, output whatever they want with that. But right now it's all kind of in a monolithic set of code base here. But for example, if we drill down into just a simple case, parse network info. Here's the actual code for that. Everything is very, again, everything that could throw an error is adding context to the context stack here to make error reporting very clean, very useful. But as you can see, we're, in this case, value happens to be a DB value here. So we're basically calling self value for key name, adding the context to that. Then we're parsing the network info from that. And then from the buffer of values data that we got. And so if we look at network info has the smarts on how to parse it. It implements parse. It just basically, it parses a tuple, a pair of Zcash and identifier. The Zcash is a string and identifier is a string. String itself has been augmented with the parse API or the parse trait. So it also knows how to parse a string using the variable length compact length at the beginning of the string. So basically the idea is, again, keep it all very semantically, very straightforward, because again, we're not trying to set up the very sophisticated structures used in a live wallet, but we are trying to create a kind of a neutral ground where all these wallets can meet and where we can abstract out what's similar about them. For Zingo, which I've only started on, again, with the Zcash D, I had to bounce back and forth between looking at the specs as have been provided to me by Shannon and I believe Paku and Darian, and the actual code itself. So I referred extensively to both the C++ and the Rust code base as well. In the case of Zingo, which I've only begun working on, I've actually copied out the core of the code of the Zingo wallet, the light wallet that is in memory, and then started to kind of implement its hard-coded structures. And then using the same parse format, basically this is all commented out because this is the actual original Zingo code, which is very heavyweight. It takes like 400 files to compile the Zingo code base because it's just Zingo lib code base. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to keep it lighter weight. But basically I'm following the same logic from top to bottom because it's a monolithic structure to parse each field as I go and verify that each field is properly parsing into memory. In some cases, they're going to be very different. They're going to be from the same functions, but they're going to be encoded differently than in Zcash, in which case those things will stay in this Zingo directory. In some cases, it turns out that they will share certain structures. In fact, it turns out, as I started delving into this last night, the compact size structure is used in a very similar way. It's the same structure used in the same way between the two kinds of wallet formats. And so I actually pulled that up to the higher level above them both because they're both going to use the exact same code for this. So basically I have the parse implemented for that compact size. And so I'm doing a lot of refactoring as I go, basically making sure that I'm not repeating myself when it comes to the kinds of structures that these wallets share in common. And doing this is both teaching me the various code bases, I think probably as quickly as practical. It's not teaching me everything. Certain things I'm glossing over, like how things are certain fields are encrypted. I'm just including them as blobs. I actually have two different kind of higher level structures representing a blob, which is a fixed size structure, fixed at compile time, and then data, which could be variable at compile time. It is wraps a vec. And as you see, when you look at the output of these things, you'll see that. So yeah, you'll see that certain things like this get output as this is a blob of 32. This is a data of 33, a data of 214. So just by looking at these things, you can see ideally what they are semantically, as well as what they're currently wrapping. That may need no further interpretation for the purpose of translation, or in some cases it might, especially decryption, which I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm not doing any decryption of anything yet, but I probably will need to do that. And this is where I could use a lot of help from the community, because to make sure that these example wallets, as we read them in, that we also, I'm going to add an affordance for the user to type their passphrase. But then we need to apply that to these things so the in-memory structures are totally decrypted, so that the ZeWIF format can be totally decrypted. It's not intended to be a encrypted format. It's intended to be an interchange format because different wallets have different ways they encrypt things. So we need to be able to fully decrypt these wallets as they come in, which I'm not doing right now. So, but that is something that is on the horizon. So having somebody jump in, look at the code and say, oh yeah, you need to decrypt these structures. Here's the proper things, the crates you need to import to actually do that. So we're not reinventing the wheel there. And here's the, the form of passphrase. Here's a little test code that shows it works. And here's the fields you need to decrypt using that. That would be very helpful for me because that would substitute for a lot of kind of working through the code myself to figure out how that is exactly supposed to work. I guess with that, I'm open to questions. There's certainly a lot more I could go into, but I think that gives you the overview.
Let me ask, so at this point, you feel like other than, obviously some of the decryption stuff that needs to be done and breaking some of these smaller blobs into smaller pieces, that you're currently fully reading everything that's in the Zcash D, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, at least in terms of, getting into memory and tagging it as, what it is in the original wallet format, not necessarily I'm promoting it to a high semantic level at this point.
So Zingo Labs, which has kind of a monolithic big binary file, is sort of next. Um, and then we really need, ideally somebody else from the community say, well, here's ours, in case we've missed something. Um, and so is there anything in particular? I mean, it sounds like you'd like somebody from Zingo Labs to start looking at this crate.
Actually, I would
And
prioritize somebody from the Zcash D community to be looking at the crate right now because that
okay.
they could actually provide the most useful feedback. Once I've got the same basic kind of parsing working for Zingo, then it would be a best time for a Zingo specialist to jump in and look at it and help me refine my work.
Okay, so uh the central stand, that's I guess that would be another message to the other people involved with who are Zcash D folk, to that it's time to start looking at this crate. It's on blockchain commons, and start validating that we're doing the right thing, that it makes sense, and is there something we're missing, or some particular object that we really must decrypt sooner than later, or parse further, yeah, deeper into objects that we've captured. Um, that's Go
Yep.
ahead.
Could Wolf, could you write that up and either share it in the Signal group or send to myself in a direct message, and I can I will pass that along internally as well to get their eyeballs on it.
Yeah, I'll send a message to the Signal chat a little later today, basically, with a call for participation.
Perfect.
Okay, and then are there any particular, like, low-hanging fruit that you might like somebody to take a look at
Well,
sooner than
just
later?
general, just mean for my own part, just the more reality checking that I get from people who have more experience with the wallet formats themselves, the better. And also because I expect that this is going to ultimately be something for the community to maintain. It would be good to, for people to jump in and figure out what I'm doing and why, either, helping me correct misconceptions I have or adding their own knowledge to the code base. So obviously, PRs are welcome, but more than that, if somebody's interested, I'd be happy to do a one-on-one deep dive into anything that, they have either, broad general knowledge or deep special knowledge of these wallet formats, so they can kind of satisfy themselves that yes, this is going to do what it needs to do, and that we're doing it in the best ways possible.
Great. Dario, do you have any questions? Is there any particular, you said you had a list of some things earlier.
Yeah, it's mostly, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's mostly about, attachments. And so we had one potential candidate for an attachment for Zexcavator. It was about an emergency recovery phrase that is sort of legacy behavior from Zcash. And what we added was first like the straight recovery phrase inside the attachments. But what we were wondering is like, should we also can we also add another more structured object inside an attachment? I was doing some.
Yes.
I'm asking mainly because I added like an envelope, the UR representation of that envelope. Is that how, for example, we should be using it for Zexcavator?
Okay, so we're talking about attachments in Gordian envelopes. So
Yes.
yeah, so everything in Gordian envelope is intended to be binary CBOR. So UR itself is a transport format for CBOR objects between in the for air gaps and things like that, for QR codes, for human handling as URIs and so on. Everything inside a Gordian envelope should be basically encoded as directly as CBOR. You could encode a UR in there, but then you just have to decode the UR and then decode the CBOR in there. But the idea being that you can either design bespoke CBOR structures that have arbitrary internal formats as long as they conform to DCBOR, the deterministic CBOR, which is just a subset of DCBOR that enforces a few deterministic rules. It's pretty easy to use. Then you're fine. Or you can actually use Gordian envelopes subject, predicate, object format and actually create, kind of semantic triples and structure your data that way, if you like, where the subjects, predicates, or objects themselves can be CBOR of any kind, but we have a lot of affordances for making that very simple.
Right. So
go ahead, Chris.
I'll just paraphrase. So an attachment, they're kind of labeled in a way so that where what the spec is, where to get it from. Within that, it can be a just a CBOR tag. Yeah, you could put a CBOR tag that's a blob. That's binary. You can put a CBOR tag for text if it needs to be text. But you can also create arbitrary valid CBOR, or technically DCBOR objects in there, and if there are tags that you need, there's basically a range of tags that you can very quickly register with IANA. They're higher numbered, slightly larger tags, and you can just tag whatever you want. You can call them whatever you want. We already have a bunch of tags registered in that high range. Some you might be able to reuse, some which might be in common with other things. Just talk with Wolf, and he can help you come up with a CBOR tag of how to do that. If you don't want to do the blob, the easier blob and text mechanism. And then obviously, one of the things that will emerge out of this is that some of these attachments, maybe shouldn't be attachments anymore. They should be, they should kind of move up to be a first class, described object in the ZeWIF spec as primary. I don't think we have a real term for it, but these first class
Well, the idea
objects.
is that with ZeWIF, we don't want to leave anybody out. We don't want no data left behind. So the idea being that the Zcash wallets all share certain kinds of things in them. I mean, they all have addresses, they all have structures, they all have inputs and outputs and all that for their transactions. Those things ought to take and they all use essentially the same algorithm. So they all really ought to take the same format in that interchange format. But at the edges, there's all kinds of fields in terms of how people have address books and receiver groups and various other things like that are different from wallet to wallet. And some of those might be kind of generically transportable, but others might be so specialized that you don't want to lose them, but you do want to transport them at least. And that's what the idea of attachments in Gordian envelopes is for. The idea being that once we define the macro format of the ZeWIF document format, that since we will support attachments, if you are creating your own variant of the ZeWIF format for your wallet, by using attachments, you can be assured that other people who process yours will either at a minimum be able to successfully ignore what you put there, and without choking on it, and at best maybe say, oh, there's something here that maybe we could parse, and because our attachments are tagged with who created the attachment, then they might be able to reach out and just immediately see your documentation for that attachment, or contact you if you haven't chosen to publish the spec, and then figure out how to deal with that attachment in their case. So it's really the idea being that it's intended to basically make it so that what we're doing here is as inclusive as possible without knowing all the possibilities in advance.
So and I'll give you two more examples, one of which is, let's say your attachment, your particular wallet supports, 100, no, 256 bytes in a message, but everybody else only supports 40. You might put the 40 byte truncated version in the standard thing for everybody to use, and then put in your attachment the full 256. So you can have some duplicated information. Of course, obviously, we'll have to document when there are truncations like that. But those are some of the things that might merge as more people use attachments. And then my second point is, you had specifically mentioned UR. So UR is an encoding format for DC Bor objects. So you don't generally want to encode in UR. You just want to decode the URs to the DC Bor representation, and that's what you want to put in the attachment. And that is a very easy thing to do. So I love that you're playing around with URs, and that but again, it's sort of it's a different layer. I mean, eventually I would love, there's no reason why you couldn't encode this entire ZeWIF as a UR, and do animated QR that transfers between two wallets, or even
Right.
wraps it in another key and encrypts it and wraps it in a wallet.
Yeah, you can think of UR as an ASCII armored transport mechanism for binary data, whereas the binary data itself should just be binary.
Yeah. The only other comment I wanted to make is that, I think there is going to be some interesting questions in regard to, data that is encrypted. Um, uh, my personal preference is that, that ZeWIF, in its fully expressed form, is completely decrypted. That there is no encrypted objects in there, maybe in attachments and stuff, but in all the core values. And then you use envelopes ability to encrypt things that might be sensitive, because you can take any part of an envelope object, elide it with an encrypted object, and you get all the advantages of being able to say, oh, well, in fact, this encrypted thing, I want to actually be an SSKR share, or I want to use, for some reason, I want to use was it dilithium? Always
Yeah,
get
well, that seems, Kyber's used for encryption.
cyber, right?
Dilithium is used for.
For some reason you want a quantum resistant version of this, and you can encrypt it with Kyber. But then it's kind of universal for everything. Now, the reality is that's not going to be completely practical. I think there will be some objects where, the ZeWIF will, always store the encrypted version of it. But I think we don't want to secure things at that level in the ZeWIF format. I think that's up to the wallets to decide, hey, there's some things that, we are sensitive about, even in exchanging wallets, from, Zingo to, the Zcash mobile wallet. And But we should, you know, we should avoid that because we can secure it at the higher level.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
makes sense?
presumably if you have spending keys in your Zcash D wallet and you want them decrypted because you want them generically in your ZeWIF file because then you want to export to some other wallet later, you want them decrypted because the encryption method in the source and destination wallets may be differently. However, because Gordian envelope itself supports encryption, then you can easily output a passphrase or whatever encrypted version of the entire ZeWIF, interchange format object. And that's another advantage of wallets, the attachments being one, encryption being another. Christopher mentioned another one, which is elision in some cases might be useful. But the point is, there's a whole stack of really useful stuff that you can take advantage of in this blockchain commons kind of stack here. But we're focused on what gets us to the main goals first.
Yeah.
I started to hear you and then you went quiet. Was
No,
that
sorry.
it?
I said, yeah. Okay, yeah. Mostly, I had another doubt about attachments, but you said I could just include bespoke format, so versioning can be managed as well, right?
Yeah.
As long as I put the conforms to link, for example, to the spec definition for that bespoke format, then that works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
and Dario,
got it.
I'm happy to if you just email me, I'll send you my calendar link. I can probably put it in the chat because I'm definitely open to send meetings with anybody who wants to do deep dives on our code, our intended uses for it, anything that seems unclear about the documentation. You don't have to do that all through GitHub PRs. Because we want to work directly with the people who are using our technologies to help them understand it and to help us understand what they need.
Zancast, do you have any questions?
There's a, I'm not sure how well aware we are of the historical deviations from the hierarchical derivation standard that BIP44 set forth that some of our wallets have, but that strikes me as the kind of edge case we need to make sure that we properly sample. So I wanted to bring that up here.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, it's not just that, but it's also, for instance, some wallets have derivations that are modified by BIP38 on a passphrase that also, that changes the path. And the problem with that, I mean, we actually recommend in the Bitcoin community don't use that capability because that just becomes one more single point of failure because then you have to back up the backup of the passphrase, so the ideal situation is that when somebody exports something, it'll say, oh, I see you've got a a key that is BIP, not just a some BIP 39 BIP 32 derivation. It's also uses a BIP 38 passphrase. Please enter in the passphrase so that we can have the whole all of it transferred to the new device, which may or may not directly support passphrases, but can use can basically go, oh, this is a special case. I need to do one more modification to the derivation to do this passphrase. The advantage also to that is that and then it's also possible to one of the big weaknesses of BIP 38, in fact, the guy who did BIP 32 is very not happy about, is that those passphrases have no checksums in them. So there have been millions of dollars lost because of passphrases, if not today with new Bitcoin prices, hundreds of millions of dollars because somebody lost their
passphrase is a valid wallet.
Yeah. So so we have to, there's definitely some best practices and advice there. Again, the ideal is that, ZeWIF, outside of any, security we give to the entire box, everything should be able to be in that box, unencrypted and available, including, oddball passwords and things of that nature. Um, so that makes sense.
But I assume Zenkus was saying that some wallets do BIP44 HD derivation differently.
Yes, that's right.
So
Yeah,
if
so
there's any way we could get documents on that, particularly from Dario, who's been working through them,
Yeah,
that would probably help a lot.
Yeah,
Exactly how
I-
it differs.
we're currently documenting one for Zcash D.
And I think we
Yeah.
might want to get Hazel involved. I have one other question, which is that Christopher said, it'd really be useful if we could get an actual export or an actual dump from the Zingo mobile app. And so I immediately turned around and said, hey, Wonky, let's get this dumped. Let's offer, export for the ZeWIF project. And he said, well, they already have our wallet.dat. So what's the point of that? I don't have time. And I said, well, the reason they need that is, and then I said dot dot dot. And so we don't understand which data or what additional data is being requested from the mobile app beyond the wallet.dats or what do you need?
We don't know yet, and that's the thing, and so we're just assuming more is better. We can
Okay,
always
all right.
proceed with what we have, and then when people actually go and attempt to run our code against their wallets, and they'll probably hit some edge cases and break, then we'll work through it together, and that may never require anybody actually send us a drained wallet or anything like that. So that's a completely optional thing at this point, as long as we have good test wallets to work with. The question is just whether the test wallets will cover the space completely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. Let's say, Wolf runs into some kind of interesting issue with a shielded transaction that has a message, but maybe there's some other things like, the USD Zcash price is used by somebody's wallet, or whatever. It would be great if we could just, have, a test flight build, or if on Android, whatever the equivalent is, that could just dump the raw data until those wallets actually support in the future, the ZeWIF export format. So this is kind of an intermediary before ZeWIF, so that we can test some things and go, what in heck is actually going on and being stored here? That would be the advantage. Now, I mean, if it's a big deal, obviously there's a threshold, but I mean, I assume you're already writing it to the private local storage. We're just saying, expose that to something where, it can be, dumped in hex, or I don't care.
Well,
And but as a
Sure.
whole.
Sure.
in
So
any
that
case-
you can use it as a development tool. That's the short
Right.
answer, right? You want to
Yeah.
use it
Yeah.
yourself. Okay. It wasn't quite clear to me what the original ask was, but I get it now. Yeah, we'll do
It's
it.
more about unknown unknowns. I mean, the example Christopher gave, for
Sure.
example, if like the wallet format supports, storing the last quote of Zcash to US dollar translation, and so we have to parse that. We're going to bring that in, but let's say none of the test wallets have that because they were all generated in a reg test framework, and they're just not testing that. Then we're going to get a bunch of wallets that, well, in the code it says this could be there, but it's not. It's just a zero, so we'll read that as best we can. But later on, somebody runs it and says, "Oh, we didn't, maybe it was big ending or something. We were parsing as little ending or something, and it's wrong, So maybe that breaks something. Maybe it's a silent failure or whatever. But at some point, we discover it's wrong. So the solution may be as simple as just, oh, that's obvious. What's wrong? Let's fix it. Or it may be, okay, let's produce a new suite of test wallets that does exercise this in the correct way, that we're verifying in the Zingo test frameworks, and then now we'll give those back to the Zmigrate thing and then fix it there. So that may be what happens.
Yeah. And basically, I'd also, any other wallet that's out there who isn't, prepared today to jump into the ZeWIF bandwagon, have, direct access to their mobile wallet data in a special build in some fashion. There's at least an opportunity to make sure that their needs are, are debuggable when they come back to us and say, well, we're beginning to do ZeWIF, but there's X, Y, and Z that doesn't work. And we go, well, let me just take a look at that file and go, oh, you're doing this big Indian or whatever. So if it's not too much work, it'd be great to have this from you and any other wallets until the ZeWIF format just becomes so ubiquitous that that's what everybody exports their stuff as.
Okay, yeah, that ask is totally clear. Thank you.
Okay, so any more? It's getting to be 2 o'clock. Any more questions for Wolf? I'm not hearing any. Shannon, do you want to close with, what are, um, action items at this point? I know we need to send something to Zcash Foundation that we're, kind of either need to merge these two or milestones or clean it up a little bit and give them a copy of this video.
Yeah, I think our action items right now are we're going to put this video out hopefully later today as soon as it gets processed from Zoom, and we'll make it available, and we'll, I think, generally expand our ask for wallet files to the larger community outside of our Signal group. We're going to talk to the ZeWIF, the Zcash community grants, and let them know that we are pushing back milestone number 2 into milestone number 3 likely, and see if there's any concerns and anything that needs to be done there. So those are both things I'll be doing. Wolf's going to be continuing with the app work and the specification and libraries coming out of that, and our goal remains very importantly to get that all done by the end of March in advance of the Zcash D deprecation, barely. And I think for Dario, the main thing, and for Zankis, the main things that we need are keep in touch with Wolf in particular for anything you need to advance on your milestones. So those are what I'm aware of that we have for action items at the moment.
Essential Stan, any action items that you have that we should just capture at the end here?
No, I have nothing to add. Yeah, any asks for ECC? If somebody posts in that Signal group, and if there's no response, I will just push that into our internal Slack to get eyeballs on it to try to prompt a swift response. And then maybe I'll follow up. I had a couple questions, but I don't want to derail anything as far as like futures. I guess maybe I could bring it up briefly, and I don't this is a lot of this is over my head, but like I'm always testing new Zashi releases and new features that, for example, this USD price thing, or like adding a note, describing inside the wallet that, like this is for this, separate from a memo, but like a note to remind you of something. Would something like that fall into what we were just talking about there? Like,
Absolutely. So, I mean, in the short term, it would be great since that wallet is open source, but it's hard to test because it's a mobile wallet. If there was
right,
a private test flight build of it,
there is.
let us know. And you add to that some way to just sort of, here's a raw export dump of, of everything, not ZeWIF, just a dump of our raw thing.
Mhm.
That would help us when you come back to us and say, oh, well, here's a new feature that, we are curious about and how are we going to
Okay.
export that in the future. We at least have that from the Zashi wallet. Obviously, we'd love it if they're ready to start taking a look at the crate
Right.
and our work, and but I don't know what their milestones are for Zcash D deprecation.
I mean,
But
obviously, as ZeWIF becomes kind of more mature, then it will probably change at a pretty slow rate. Whereas the inputs and outputs to it, where wallet developers are, legitimately competing in the free market, those may change rapidly, and those will probably require them to maintain their their export to ZeWIF or their import from ZeWIF to manage those features that they're either ingesting from others or exporting of theirs that they hope people will support. So, there will be a lot going around on the fringes as the center matures.
Yeah, and obviously attachments is one of our milestones by the end of this. It was supposed to be this week, but it's because of these things, it's delayed because of the waterfall. Instead of using Agile rather than waterfall, we're delayed on it. But one of them is a guide on attachments, and the idea is you've got some unique feature. Don't let ZeWIF, core stop you from doing that new feature. Protect your users by exporting it as an attachment with the rest of your WIF data. And later, if some other wallet comes along and says, hey, we'd really like to be able to read that, they know who to go to get the data. So we found this to be an effective model.
And particularly
so
to go to get the data format.
Right.
Okay. I guess one follow-up question then, would it be helpful if I got Wolf or anybody a Zashi test flight invite?
I think that would be Wolf, Shannon, and I. So
Okay.
It couldn't hurt. Obviously, since there's only one of me, I can only focus on one thing at a time, and ideally,
Of course.
one wallet format at a time. But so right now, my focus is on Zingo. But again, my next goal after that is to start abstracting what's common between Zingo and Zcash up to a higher level of abstraction that will form the basis of the output document format, which we'll be specing. So, but the more I know going in about what other wallets might and what formats they have, and this, of course, contributing to the Zcash wallet format repo is also important, where those things are documented. That's my first go-to when I want to, see what maybe documented similarities and differences are between these wallet formats. Along with test wallets and stuff like that can be released publicly, put there. So that would be, all the contributions to that repo, as well as, eyes on the Zmigrate repo itself would be helpful.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Obviously, we'll use the Signal chat for communication notices. I don't think we have a next meeting scheduled, but I suspect we'll need to have one before the final milestone, or even two before the final milestone, which would mean 2 in a month next month. Only other thing I wanted to say, if you're interested, a week from tomorrow, the larger Gordian wallet interoperability meeting is happening at 10 a.m. Pacific time a week from tomorrow. And the topic is, we've recently added some new post-quantum crypto functionality to the envelope stack, so you can do key agreement and encryption and other stuff there. And then we have one of the hardware wallet companies is actually implementing it to be able to communicate between backup stores and things of that nature in a secure way. So you might be interested in attending that meeting, and it'll kind of give you an idea of kind of what the future is, because I would love to see post this project, the Zcash community do similar things. Don't necessarily have to be post quantum, but the importance is that backups and resilience and no single points of failure is basically part of the Gordian principles.
Oh,
I
one other
feel-
quick request I would make to the people in the ZeWIF signal is if you are an expert in a particular area of Zcash for your wallet format, if you would be my go-to person for particular kinds of questions, obviously since I'm new to the community, if you would just drop me a quick DM and just say, hey, I'm this person and this is the kind of questions you would send to me personally, that would be awesome.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. As I said, we'll have this video up later today and share it around. Thank you very much.